But yeah, there's potential for some real fugly games. So a lot of amazing defenses. Should be something special.
All right, they may have lost us here. This happened to Josh and Adam yesterday, but let me see what to do here. Bum, bum, bum. Hit new stream and see what happens there.
We have no stream to show.
New stream from previous.
Wish we had the Raptors game. Ba, 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 bum, bum. Hey, ho, ho, ho.
All right.
All right, I'm going to look at ownership.
That sounds good.
We'll see if we can come up with a good fade for today. We'll see if a lot of people try to jump on board the Luke Kennard train again or something. I'm just kidding. He was a fine play. He just didn't deserve on a very nice slate to, be the highest owned guy. Or tied with Drummond or wherever he ended. I can't quite recall.
All right. Well, if anybody would like to help me and let me know if you can see us, that would be helpful. I think we're live again here, but I can't tell for certain. We've got a lot of people being very, very helpful here, making fun of us.
Thank you. You've been very helpful.
Which is, that's always good and constructive at the same time. All right, we are live now. Okay, so let me get back here to the live stream. Ugh, what a mess. All right, well, we're going to just drop YouTube there. This is something that's been happening with YouTube. It's not on our end. I was asking Josh and those guys about it, what could be causing it, and it's been just a little messy. So I am plugged into the router, as always, so I think we are good here. I'm going to see if I can get the right channel up, and we'll go from there. But I'm just going to assume that we are live. So back to this, the Nick Batum is kind of where we went down, where you were mentioning he had 4 shots. I was going to say, hey, the best part about those 4 shots, or the second best part is next year he's going to make $27 million.
Yeah.
So congrats.
He's getting,
congrats to him. Yeah, it's been a little messy here.
He made half of them, including his only 3. I mean, another really dicey matchup for him. So yeah, just in case the whole Nick Batum analysis didn't get in, I have no idea if they'll start him again. There's a number of ways they could go with this team. The matchup, like basically everyone on the slate who doesn't play on Boston, is pretty crappy. But 4-game slate, not a lot of really exciting value. Obviously, there's some guys carrying some upside, like Rondo, who will be popular, I'm sure, and a number of other plays in that situation. But yeah, if we find out he's getting the start again, I'm probably in for minimum price Batum if we think he plays 30 minutes again. But again, hasn't been good this year. Hasn't been healthy this year. It's on a back-to-back. I'm really not surprised whatsoever if he gets called from the starting lineup in this particular situation. Ran a pretty tight 9-man rotation yesterday. He could sit. But basically, it's a situation where I don't think everyone will have realized that he started yesterday and played 30 minutes because, again, it was on the early slate and it's an NFL day. And so hopefully the information distribution is a little slow to catch up. If you get news that Nick Batum is starting again, I have to like him. I have to, put him somewhere around that 30-minute range again. And even with a woeful game and a projection of, we'll knock him all the way down to like 19 fantasy points. That's still pretty good at the absolute flat min on FanDuel and DraftKings. So it's definitely something we are keeping an eye on as we get to that game.
Yeah, and the DNP wouldn't shock me either. He is
not at all.
He has only played on 2 back-to-backs this year because of a variety of injuries, but he's getting 15 minutes basically in those 2. And this was his first game back after missing 5. So
yeah,
surprised that he played 30 minutes. Wouldn't shock me if they give him this one off. We have a ton of teams that are playing tomorrow. I didn't do a double check to see if we have anybody on the front end of back-to-backs. All right, so back end of back-to-backs, Charlotte, as we've hit upon, LA and Indiana and Milwaukee. So 4 teams.
Let's see. The Pacers host Toronto tomorrow, so they're on the front end of a back-to-back.
Oh, I thought they played yesterday. Sorry.
The Pacers.
No, you're right. They play
No,
tomorrow. They play Toronto. You're correct.
they play tomorrow and they play Toronto. Let's see. The Bucks you mentioned there on the back end. They I mean, if you call it
Clippers, Hornets, and Bucks are the 3 on back-to-backs.
Right.
Tonight.
That are on the back end. And then the Nuggets are on the front end of roadie. They're in LA tonight and they're in Phoenix tomorrow. And that may be the only 2 on the front. So your teams that are not on any end of a back-to-back are the Lakers, the Thunder, and the Celtics. I'll double check that, but that feels right.
All right. Oh, this is good to know. We stay live on Periscope no matter what.
So they heard us talk through that and me singing my Christmas carols.
They did. Nice. They did.
I'm enjoying the bass timbre in my voice as I'm a little bit under the weather, so having some fun with that. Ho 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 ho! All right.
Well, we're okay. We're all set. We're all stable now. I've got good bars. We're not dropping frames. So okay. So anything else from Charlotte?
I can drop some good bars. Well, yeah, we they it's a 4-game slate. We have to give everybody
that was my way of nudging us back.
Okay. You knew the answer to your question. So you can always run Malik Monk out there. You may get yourself 18 minutes. You may get yourself 25 or 26, but none of these guys have a good matchup. But I certainly have a non-zero amount of Malik Monk who can spike an upside and is all of $300 more than Batum on FanDuel, where it seems a little more likely. The prices on Cody Zeller are significant. With his sort of questionable role. Again, he went to the bench when Batum started, by the way. Zeller came off the bench. There's certainly no one else here who's a priority. I would still prefer to spend the extra $900 to $1,100 for Zeller over Biyombo, but I'm not really excited to get to either one. Short slate, you can spend the $4,000 on Marvin Williams, who seems like he'll get about 25 minutes no matter what. You can play Miles Bridges, but I seriously doubt this is the spot he shakes the money. I would say at their prices, I would probably slightly rather go with Rozier than Devontae Graham. Again, when these two teams got together and tangled a little bit earlier this year, you did not get very good games out of, all these guys, put mildly. Devontae Graham was pretty good off the bench. He ended up with 15, 4, 9, and 2 steals on 2 for 10 shooting from 3 and 5 for 14 shooting. He's been struggling more after a somewhat unsustainable Steph Curry-like shooting performance for about 6 weeks there. That's started to regress to what he can still have improved greatly as a player and would still have come down from those peaks that he was hitting. Rozier was terrible when they played earlier this year. 1 for 11 from the field. Now that game was in Charlotte. He's actually returning to Boston here if you're weaving narratives. But again, Terry Rozier at 26 minutes had 3 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and 4 turnovers. That was some fugly game. So I have trouble. I'm a big fan of the Celtics. The teams we want to target today are the Celtics, the Clippers, in theory, the Lakers, although they may have jumped the shark as far as level of ownership in a really, really difficult matchup. But that's a conversation to be had. But yeah, I'm pretty well through Charlotte there. Keep an eye out for a starting lineup, and at flat minimum price, Nick Batum starting, hard to get away from.
All right, so over on the Boston side, of course, no Gordon Hayward in that one. Nobody really jumping out from me.
No Marcus Smart either.
Oh shoot, he still got that eye infection, right?
Yeah,
I read something about it the other day. It said it was the doctors have said it was, or the team doctors said it was the worst they'd seen.
Apparently,
yeah.
Like, I've had an eye infection. Dude's having some real issues here.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun by any stretch of the imagination. So we've got Kemba in there, picking up the hefty guard duty. You've got Jaylen Brown, who is doing all right. You've got Enes Kanter, who had a moment the other night. As we're looking to some of these guys as counter moves to the Lakers shock, what is standing out for you?
I really like Enes Kanter in tournaments. It is hard to find the center spot to get away from a really nicely priced Montrezl Harrell. I'm a big fan of on FanDuel. I think there's if Sabonis is out, especially, I'd be pretty interested in Miles Turner and probably would end up over the field there. But Enes Kanter is an absolutely elite rebounder, and he's not going to get in a better rebounding spot than this one. If you looked at that last game he played, I want to say 22 minutes for the Celtics and had 18 rebounds. So that adds quite a bit of a floor there. Just missed his double-double on the points, but pretty big fan of Enes Kanter in some sort of tournament position. You almost don't need the value on FanDuel depending on what comes out with these other guys. There aren't a ton of spend-up options and a lot of the mid-range options where you look at, Harrell and Brown and Kemba are all still cheap enough that it's certainly not a necessity to get there, depending on whether or not we have Batum as a pretty valuable piece to look at there. But yeah, the Celtics, overall, one of my favorite teams to target here. This is a very good matchup for them. We have our usage nicely more focused into a convenient package of three guys we can look at. Obviously, talking about Brown, Kemba, and Tatum. They're really the only team on the slate where I'm like, hey, that's a really good matchup for them. Whereas everyone else, I have some real issues. They're also the largest favorites on the slate against a Charlotte team that, much like Devontae Graham, without him putting on superhuman performances, starting to regress towards not producing quite as well. Again, they were everyone's pick, including mine, to be the worst team in the NBA this year, and they have drastically outperformed that standard. And Devontae Graham deserves a lot of credit there, but definitely a tough spot for them. So as far as the Celtics go, it's another situation where I struggle to think of coming up with a lineup that doesn't have one of those big three I was just referring to in either Brown or Walker or Tatum. And frequently, I think you'd want more than one. At their prices, they all end up pretty close. I end up with Jaylen Brown barely being the best one on FanDuel, where he's 600 less than Tatum and 900 less than Kemba. On DraftKings, I end up with Tatum being the best one, but they're all within hairs on all sites. As far as the actual projection goes, my favorite would be Tatum. Just if you're telling me I have to pick one by a nose, it would be Jason Tatum, I think, for me. But plenty of interest in basically everyone we expect to start and see real time for this team. You're just going to have them out there spending lots of time against, non-DFS entities of, last game they started Ojale and Tice alongside these three guys. And you had a woeful game out of Kemba. If you're looking for a reason to get away from Kemba in what looks like a brilliant spot, he was absolutely dreadful in the last game and absolutely dreadful when they played Charlotte earlier this year. In that, and I'm trying to remember his. I think I should have it here somewhere. But his last game, I know he didn't make a shot. And let's see. When they played Charlotte earlier this year, blew him out a little bit, won by 21. Shot 4 for 12, had 14, 2, 6, and 1. Numbers up there, but Gordon Hayward was in for that game and was the one who had the big game. He had 20 and 10 in that game. He's gone. So it would be remarkably difficult for him to put up a massive, massive stinker in this situation. And definitely possible that like two of these guys end up in the winning lineup. So I'm a pretty big fan of the Celtics, and having just taken my first peek at the ownership here, and yeah, Lakers. Holy crap.
It's big numbers.
I have a good bit of interest in all these guys, and the ownership looks like about where I would think it should be. So I would rather play Kanter than Tice, probably on FanDuel, certainly in any sort of tournament setting in cash. I'm fine if you land on Daniel Tice. Bob Williams is still out. It's worth pointing out that Carson Edwards has actually been recalled from the G League. The original injury report, the 130, said he was still down in the G League, but we got news later that he has been recalled. So Carson Edwards will actually be available to play there. But we still have no Vincent Poirier, no Bob Williams, and again, obviously, no Smart, no Hayward. So I have no problem with Tice in anything at that price. I have no problem with Canner in anything at that price. I have no problem with those three other guys. I ranked Carson Edwards. That's just GPPs, but if you think this game blows out, he will be in there slinging, and it's the largest line on the slate. You can play Brad Wanamaker, although we had Brad Wanamaker chalk day, and that was one about 10 times this year. Shout out Luke Kennard, where it went very well, where I was really down on some evident chalk, and apparently it took everyone that day to realize something I already knew, which is he's really not that good. So I don't care how many minutes he's going to get. But it's a 4-game slate, and now his ownership has maybe swung back too far the other way, where we can expect him to get 20 some odd minutes, and he's going to be 2% owned on a 4-game slate. I probably have more than that on Brad Wanamaker at this point. That's the way that goes. But yeah, Celtics, a team we're really should be looking to take significant pieces of, and I like Enes Kanter a lot. Yeah.
All right, on to our next game. Indiana Pacers at Milwaukee.
Really need some news on this one. Like, we should almost skip it. We should skip it.
Let's do that. Let's do that
until we get news, because we have both Jeremy Lamb and Domantas Sabonis questionable. If they're probable or doubtful, you can plan one way or the other, or if we know exactly what's going on. But hoping to get some news there. Let's move on to another game, because I'm really not sure how that's going to go down.
You know what? Everybody wants this one. Let's just jump to the last one. Denver and Lakers. That's where all the chalk is. We might as well get through that, and then we'll circle back to the middle two games. So this is the late night hammer. We've got LeBron James almost assuredly out. It's not official yet. 208.
That's what doubtful means.
Yep.
It should be about 90-10 to be out. So you got to plan that way for the moment. If he this shouldn't have to be said, but if he ends up being in, it's a significant downgrade to Rondo and Anthony Davis most immediately. And at those guys being owned 50 some odd percent. So in the event you get news that LeBron is in, I would turn a lot of my Anthony Davis into LeBron pretty quick, and turn a lot of my Rondo into another value guy.
Yep, most definitely. So we're looking at, depending on the site and player, between 60 and 80% on Rondo and Davis. You're looking in the 30s there for Kuzma. On the other side here, I think we're missing the boat on a really good matchup for Nikola Jokic coming into this one. And then going against Jokic, who do you prefer? Would you go with Howard or McGee? Are they both viable? Would you play them both in the same lineup here? Or are projections going to kind of take care of that? It's a slower pace game, but those guys are going to, between Plumlee coming in, I mean, the Lakers are going to have to put a traditional center out there almost the whole game. So that's something we don't always see them have to do.
Well, let me ask you this: why do you say it's a good matchup for Jokic? Because I would disagree. I do not believe now he's been playing massively better, and I have no issue with anyone playing Jokic. Like, he is one of the most streaky guys from output to production where he goes, and it frequently comes at the start of the year, and then he gets towards the holiday time and just he flicks a switch and starts banging. And it's amazing how many times we have gone through we're going to be back there again in 2 weeks where we're like, oh God, Jokic is the best passing big man ever, and this guy's absolutely amazing. And he's like, it's funny from a fantasy context, but I look at this as a pretty poor matchup for him, and I'm curious.
Yes, I think I stated that incorrectly. I think it's good based upon where all of the ownership is going today. From the fantasy perspective. These, I mean, you mentioned at the top, these are two of the best defensive teams in the league. That's not going to help anybody there. Slight bonus, I guess, that it's at sea level for everybody, but this one is going to be who's going to guard him better. I'm seeing that this is a nice pivot, I should say, away from the Davis, away from Paul George, etc. here from a fantasy perspective. But let's start off here with your thoughts on how much is too much of Davis and Rondo, or do we just try to find pivots elsewhere because we have 7 other spots?
Well, let me look at these. Let me look at these exact numbers. So on FanDuel, we have Rajon Rondo on top at 56% owned, and Anthony Davis second at 52% owned, and Giannis third at 37 for context, and Kuzma fifth at 27, which, hard not to like that. It sort of ends up being an interesting Batum pivot situation where I imagine Kuzma, who is probable, steps back in and starts. Well, me look at some actual number projections and see exactly where I expect this to play out. So give me just 1 second. Shill something.
So we have Fantasy Draft as the sponsor tonight. Reminder that it's the only rake-free DFS site that we have out there. They were running the $150,000 Hooters main event today, and that is one that we saw our own Adam Ship My Money Share win for a cool $100,000 earlier this season. The key thing about Fantasy Draft, it's rake-free. So how this works is everybody gets $100 every 30 days to play. If you want to play more than that, then you need to have a subscription. My subscription is $5.99. That gets me $1,000 in play for 30 days before it renews itself. That is, so if I were to play those $1,000 that I'm able to for the $5.99 on any other site, that's going to cost me somewhere between $120 and $150. This is significantly less. Even if I don't play there every day, it is significantly less. And well worth it to me. I was just looking at my savings. They're just over $50. I have done 3 1-month subscriptions, so that's 18. So I have now saved $32, even though I'm not playing there every day. That's not a bad way to go at Fantasy Draft. So you definitely want to check them out. If you have not yet signed up, you can use the promo code Osmo and get $1,000 in play for your first 7 days. So if you're ready to go over there and jump on in, especially with Christmas coming up, there's going to be some massive tournaments for the NBA on Wednesday. Definitely check them out. It is the place to be.
Solid show. Nice job. I believed. You sold me.
There we go.
It is... All right. If I have to come in under on one of those two guys, it's probably going to be Anthony Davis for me. And that is difficult to say. I've been a pretty big believer in the Nuggets defense all year, but as you stated, we are on the road here, so we are on sea level. So a lot to talk about with Anthony Davis. I don't know if you realize this. In the Bucks game, Anthony Davis played the entire second half.
I did not know that.
They took Anthony Davis, dealing with a serious shoulder injury that he's had for a while and an additional leg injury, and played him the entire second half. Ended up playing 43 minutes in that game, which is absurd to me. Now, it felt good sort of as an analyst because I said at the beginning of the show, you know, for these guys and Giannis, and like, I really think we can expect their minutes to push up a little here. This was Thursday. Nobody's on a back-to-back, and I think this game is meaningful and important, and the coaches and the players get into it. So I think all your stars, you can expect to see some extra time. I didn't think they'd do that sort of suicidal shit, but so that's a real thing that happened. This is a legit tough matchup. Yeah, and again, I said if I have to come in under on one of these guys, it's really tough to get away from Rondo. I'll just start with Rondo because that's the one that's harder for me to get away from. Your argument is he's Rondo, so he's already a very inconsistent quantity. The matchup is, again, dreadful, and they can end up throwing more time at the crap ton of guards they have floating around there. You can get Caruso game, Troy Daniels can get back in the rotation, you get Avery Bradley, you have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, you have Danny Green. He's a guy who can miss all his shots. So at 60% owned, or wherever Rondo is going to land, there's always some reasons to get away, but on the face of it, he's really cheap on a slate without a lot of value, and hard not to think he sees some extra minutes running the offense here, which is something that needs to be done. I do think it's worth pointing out that it's a good idea to have some extra shares of Caruso, most notably, in the event that you just need Rondo foul trouble for that to work out, and to have, 30-1 leverage against the field. I think that's generally a good idea. I would try to be over there. I would try to get some direct leverage on these guys, or sometimes just, leave this game entirely. Again, this was the highest scoring of the first time these teams got together. Both LeBron and Anthony Davis played 37 minutes in that game. Both of them shot 9 for 18. Both of them scored 25 real points. Anthony Davis had 10 rebounds, an assist, and a block for what's a somewhat unappealing 42 or so fantasy points. LeBron ended up with 25, 6, and 9. No steals, no blocks. Denver does not turn the ball over a lot for a slightly more exciting 48 or so. if you do the real math on this, and Anthony Davis getting basically, I think he's 38, 39% usage when he's out there, and LeBron is not out there, it still maths out very well for him, especially when we consider the paucity of pay-up options. And it's not like Giannis is incredibly under-owned, so we'd have to figure out where else to spend money. But I certainly could make an argument to myself that, I'd bite on the Rondo and I'd let Anthony Davis go and play some of the pretty exciting plays on the Clippers and the Celtics and, Giannis, and you can still certainly spend that money. So, that is a big money expenditure for a guy who is super expensive and has been known to go back to the locker room from time to time. So there's always going to be merit towards fading guys that are that highly owned. It is a very rare player that should be owned more than 60, 70%. We've seen about 15 of them this year, and I've been against that ownership on about 13 of them, and that's been the right call about 10 of them so far. Now, again, one game doesn't matter, so I'm not shocked if Anthony Davis, without LeBron James, puts up a virtuoso performance tonight and just does everything for this team. And like I have him projected for 24 shots. That number could be 29. Like you could get a massive, massive performance out of him here. But if you're telling me I have to get away from one of those guys, I would probably first get away from Anthony Davis because it is a very poor matchup. No super strong takes here. Those ownerships in the 50 to 60% range for Rondo and for Anthony Davis, the way this slate is comprised, makes sense, and they're not wildly out of bounds. And I think I would have in that range, as bad as it sounds. But there are some compelling reasons to get away. So I end up talking about it for a while and not ending up with a super strong take on what to do with these guys. I certainly think in the event you are off, these guys do pick up. I would prefer Danny Green over KCP, but have one of those guys. I'd certainly have interest in getting some Alex Caruso for the number of ways that works out being the right play there. I'm not super in on either of the centers. Again, if memory serves, the pricing is not nearly as advantageous as we would like it to be based on a couple spike performances. I think they're like 43, 43, 43, and 44 collectively for their prices around the industry. In this matchup, I would prefer to play JaVale to Dwight Howard if I had to pick one of these guys based on what I've seen in the past. Kyle Kuzma is very interesting.
You'd prefer JaVale over Dwight Howard?
I would.
Okay. I'm just heading that question off again. It's definitively for people that aren't paying attention. It's JaVale over Howard because
I would prefer JaVale McGee over Dwight Howard, having seen this a number of times and thinking about how this game could evolve into the smaller lineups. And I have to guess a little bit of Kuzma's role and a couple other things. I, presuming he starts, would prefer Kuzma to either of them. He is cheaper by $400 some on FanDuel and almost $1,000 on DraftKings. He has been, as you pointed out, bad this year, and this matchup is bad, but dude's $3,500. I have him right now starting and playing 26 minutes. That makes him fine. And again, he's looking to be fairly chalky, so perfectly fine to get away from 25% on wholly unowned Kyle Kuzma. Wholly unproven. Quite a bit going wrong there. But yeah, no strong takes against ownership. Everything's about where it should be. But yeah, you can certainly rationalize getting away from either of these guys. The real appeal to Rondo is the fact that he can demolish that price. Like Anthony Davis in this matchup is too cheap at 10-1 on DraftKings, 10-6 on FanDuel, I think are the numbers. That's fine. Those are still great prices without LeBron. With the boosted usage and everything, even in this horrific matchup, I haven't projected for nearly 60 fantasy points. That's very hard to get away from. He should be priced without LeBron in that, James Harden, Luka 12K territory, and he's not. He's 10 or 10.5. That's too cheap, but he is appropriately owned for it, and it isn't hard to imagine a way it doesn't work out. So I am very much talking out of both sides of my mouth, but it's because the guy's 50% owned. Yeah, there's, obviously a whole range of results, and that number is right about where it should be. But again, the advantage for Rondo is Rondo getting a triple-double here wouldn't surprise me, even against Denver. He can get up for a big game. Rebounding upside will be up. Obviously, the assist upside will be massively up without LeBron out there. Someone has to actually run the offense. You can run it through Anthony Davis. There is actually some bits of negative correlation with these two guys. But at 4.6 on FanDuel and 4.3 on DraftKings for Rajon Rondo, yeah, you can get 50 fantasy points out of him tonight. That makes it really, really hard to get away from. It'll be interesting to see who starts.
Batum starting, no word on any minutes limit. JaMychal Green is available. He will be on a minutes limit, and then game time decisions for the Pacers guys. So we are not going to know.
That's okay. Well, I will say let's talk about Denver just for 1 second longer. I have non-passing interest in Paul Millsap. I don't think you need to take the plunge on FanDuel since, again, he is sitting questionable again. But on DraftKings, I really like Jeremy Grant at $3,900. And if he starts, which I think is, I'll go 60-40 that he plays and starts this game. This is a very good matchup for Paul Millsap. This is his type of game. $4,700 Paul Millsap, who is going to be unowned. I would have some interest. I would have quite a bit of interest. He's a guy I would be looking to get not massively on, but I would be sitting there looking at DraftKings lineups as this game is about to get going. And in the event you get Paul Millsap in and starting, I would take a strong position. It's the 9:30 game. If you get that news at 9 o'clock, no one's going to be looking. He's going to be 4% owned, and at $4,700, he would be my favorite Denver guy. But overall, this game, guys just are not outside of Rondo and Anthony Davis priced that well for their situation. Spending $7,000 for Jamal Murray against the Lakers, that's not objectively great. And having Braun out does not diminish the quality of their defense incredibly. You'll get Dudley time, you'll get Kuzma time. Those are both upgrades, but not so much that these guys aren't overpriced against a team that plays with a lot of torpor. So he would be pretty quickly my favorite Nugget. So something to keep in mind there.
All right, Patrick Beverley officially out.
Okay, didn't expect that. Now we got to go back in here. I'm not going to have time to push a ratings update, but that's very much interesting.
Can you play Caruso and Rondo on the same team? I would say yes on a 4-game slate.
That's exactly the right answer and the reason why. Yeah. It's also this really needs to be said once a week to make it clear. They're giving away 15 to 30% of the prizes to first place. Having a unique lineup is incredibly valuable simply because when you hit it, you're giving yourself a better chance of taking that home. So these two guys who cost in the 4K range, yes, they have played next to each other. And even if they played collectively 48 minutes, they easily could put up 30 each and work their way in there. And most importantly, they're both viable as plays on their own and would give you a lineup construction that would be wholly unique or very close to it. There's not going to be a lot of Rondo plus Caruso out there in the world. So I would have no problem with it. Again, you're making a play that is likely to fail, but has a significant upside when it does not. And that I think long-term, it's a good thing to do.
All right. Shit. I guess let's talk OKC and LA. We've got 17 minutes here. Paul George. On the other side, I think you can go to Chris Paul. I think you can also consider Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
You're selling my guy Montrez and my guy Lou Williams short. Don't get me wrong. Paul George is good, and I don't mind 3 Paul George mentions, but I'd end up with a couple Harrell and on FanDuel.
All right,
a number of Lou Williams.
Here, so just hit it. Just go with it. Don't worry about what I have.
I'm just playing with you.
No. I know. I'm saying, but the chat's gonna get mad about my thoughts. So go.
I really like those 3 players. A very Joel Embiid in Philadelphia type situation where when Kawhi is in, these guys are priced based on their average production. It all takes a significant kick when Kawhi Leonard plays. So they are all always going to be everything else in a vacuum. A little bit too expensive when Kawhi is playing and a little bit too cheap when Kawhi is not. When these two teams played the first time this year, actually, that was a Kawhi out game. I'm 99% sure. So click, box. Yes, they played earlier this year. Beverly was in, but Kawhi was out. Paul George, and again, this game ended 90-88. Paul George did not have a brilliant game. 18 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 7 turnovers. That's pretty stank Paul George game. And I still absolutely love him tonight. I don't give one crap about that, but just since I'm talking about the other guys with their good box scores, got to look at that. Montrezl Harrell had 28 and 12 with 5 assists, a steal, and a block. So he had 54 fantasy points in this exact matchup. Steven Adams was in. He was in that game. I'll look, but I'm positive I recall him. He was in. He started. He played 27 minutes. Almost identical matchup. Did 50 something last time. I'm a big fan of him. Him and Cantor. Two guys in GPPs, I think, sort of leading the way for me at center. I'm a little more excited to play them than, say, Nikola Jokic. Lou Williams played 32 minutes off the bench. Quiet night for him. Again, Harrell took 20 shots in that game. Paul George took 14. Lou Williams took only 12. Still put up a perfectly tolerable 11.9 assist, 1 rebound, 1 steal effort in those 32 minutes. I'm not at all concerned about the back-to-back for him. It hasn't been an issue at all this year. First guy in on FanDuel for me again. Yesterday was kind of tepid and only 6x his score or whatever, putting up 32. 5,100 is an obscenity. That's absolutely ridiculous. On DraftKings, I have him behind Harrell and George. On FanDuel, he's probably the best play on the slate. I'd have to go look at it offhand. Maybe I'm missing somebody. But those big 3 guys, I'm a big fan of all of them tonight. Not that different from the Celtics, and where most lineups I really want to see 1 or 2 of them looking back at me. Beyond that, it's a slightly better than average matchup for Ivica Zubac, given Adams' lack of an outside shot whenever you see him in a matchup like that, or Whiteside. Those are spots in which you should get yourself some Zubac exposure. Had a double-double when they played earlier this year, 12 and 10, but yes, you can play Zubac and Harrell to hit that inevitable question. When this game happened earlier this year, no Kawhi, these exact same 2 teams, you probably wanted them both in the winning lineup. Zubac was a little short of 30, so maybe not, but he got there in his 20 minutes and Harrell got there in his 28. I'm not trying to do that. And especially if you have, like, I would very much like to play one of those guys. Harrell would be the priority for me. If I have Zubac, that would hypothetically, hopefully, be one of the lineups where I'm getting away from Montrez. Other things to discuss here. So Pat Beverly being out is going to open up a wrinkle or two for me. Let me project exactly how this is going to play, and then we should get to that Pacer game. So we do have some precedent.
All right, some questions as you're looking that up. If you were building 3 lineups, hand building, are there 3 players that you would put in across all 3 lineups? I was assuming it would be George, Davis, and Rondo. But does anybody crack that? Does Harrell get in? Does Williams?
I don't think any players would be in all 3 lineups for me.
Okay.
No, I don't think versus ownership. I'll take a real deep dive through ownership in about 3 minutes once we burn through the Pacers game and hope to have some news there. As far as the Clippers go and Sans Beverly, they've gone all sorts of ways. I don't know if Terrence Mann gets a ceremonial start. We had almost exact same situation with the show where he got called out with 20 minutes to go, and again, Terrence Mann was starting and he was the flat 3K at that point, and he was very popular, and I said, he's not good enough to be 40% owned. He was 40% owned. He had 10 fantasy points in the first 3 minutes and played 28 minutes and ended with like 14 fantasy points. Very Kennard-like, actually, come to think of it. But there is no one on this team in the absence of Beverly who all of a sudden gets there. You pick up the random bits of Jerome Robinson time. You get, random more time for Harkless, who would be minorly more interesting now. Terrence Mann. If I had to go to someone here, it would be Landry Shamet. I think it's reasonable to look at it as I'm now moderately interested in him as what will be too low owned piece of value. So Landry Shamet, I'm upgrading in rankings, and I'm going to push.
How about
Magruder
as well?
There's just not enough upside for me, and I'm not convinced he gets enough time. I can look at last 2 games Beverly sit. Magruder got 24 minutes off the bench, 4 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Like he almost got there. He took 4 shots in his 24 minutes. Next game played 15 minutes off the bench, did not score. I have trouble justifying that. If someone said I have, 5 shares of Rodney Magruder in my 150, yeah, it's a 4-game slate. He could at bare minimum price get 26. That's obviously in the range of possibilities, but it's not someone I'm actively targeting. Landry Shamet could now take 15 shots, is a little more likely, could do more ball handling, could take some threes, and just he's not that much more exciting. So, or he's not that much more expensive. So Shamet would be the priority upgrade for me here amongst these players.
All right, 11 minutes. I'm just keeping an eye on it so we can make sure we get that.
What do we know about the Pacers? Let's talk about it, and let's do it quickly. We're running out of time.
We don't know anything about them. We know there's still game time decisions for Lamb and for Sabonis. The question, I guess, would be how much do you want to bump Turner and Brogdon in the absence of that news, and how much do you want to potentially downgrade Giannis on the they played yesterday on the back-to-back and potentially against a team that may not be able to keep up with them.
Yeah, we're going to be, looking for this to be a bit of an issue. The Bucks, again, won a slow grind-out contest by there. I mean, the Bucks are still the fastest team in the league. And, you look at the Pacers and you think this could have been good. And really the only Pacer you would have wanted the first time they played, in fairness, first time they played this, not incredibly analogous because Brogdon was out and Lamb was out of that game. You got Justin Holiday starting and playing 34 minutes. He didn't get to 20 fantasy points. You got Aaron Holiday starting. He shot 5 for 18 from the field. That's not exciting. Miles Turner would have been the best player on this team. He had a 16 and 10 double-double with 2 assists, a steal, and 4 blocks. He can pick up 4 blocks in a matchup. That's higher than I would project him for, but I think Miles Turner's 5,100 on DK. If Sabonis is out, you pick up additional rebounding upside. He can get a lot of work done down low. So, yeah, it would be hard for me. If you get news that Jakar Sampson is starting, he's going to be, Jan 1% owned. That's something you can do. I'd have him at about 24 minutes and 17 fantasy points. It's wholly unexciting, but you can do it. If either Lamb or Sabonis is in on a slate this small, it is especially beneficial to expose yourself to them. So swapping to Domantas Sabonis or to Jeremy Lamb from other plays that are unexciting is going to math out as the correct play more often than not, a la Wiggins last night, a la just 1,000 other guys who guys are not highly enough owned when you have to swap into them. And when there isn't any incredible matchup versus ownership, this guy is super overowned, this guy is super underowned. That's one of the largest advantages on the slate. So do keep track of news if you're on a site allowing late swap, and swap aggressively. I'm not saying if Sabonis is in, you go to 100% Sabonis, but in a vacuum on this slate, Domantas Sabonis should be 14% owned. If he gets ruled in 15 minutes before that game tips off, he's going to be 3% owned. That's something, every little bit that you can take advantage of. Special shout out to Chris Middleton, who, especially on FanDuel, is still a little too cheap. I understand that there's a lot of muddied waters at this point, but you're still looking at Middleton without Bledsoe. Him being 6,100 is well too cheap. And yes, they very possibly beat the shit out of them, but they got to get there. And the 2 guys who are going to get them there are Giannis and Chris Middleton, more likely than anyone else. So I'm fine with Brolo in this matchup. I don't like him as much as I did last night, where he had some really weird box score with a lot of fantasy points attached. Yeah, and I'll handle some one-on-ones to rank these guys versus each other, and maybe let's go through the ownership real quick and talk about some options. But I'm a big fan of Middleton. If George Hill is out, it doesn't do a ton for me for anyone except DiVincenzo becomes a little bit more appealing as a play. His price is still nominal. If Hill is in, it's not quite as exciting for me, but in the event that he's out, I think you can go there. If you end up minus Lamb and minus Sabonis, Justin Holiday is the real guy I would first look to, because he'll just jack up some shots. He's only 3,900 on FanDuel. I'd actively want a lot of that. If Lamb is out, you're going to get a very highly owned Aaron Holiday, and I'm fine with that. It is a tough matchup specifically for him, but $4,500 for a guy who at that point is going to play 34 minutes is just objectively still too cheap. So it's fine to go with the field there. If everybody's out, Doug McDermott comes into play on a slate this small. And don't forget to also increase your exposure to TJ Warren, who has not played great, but minus those guys, get some usage. And again, Turner we've talked about, and also don't forget Brogdon. Not a thrilling matchup for him, but his prices have normalized to a tolerable level, and mostly Sabonis. If you take Sabonis, but also Lamb out of there, you're just going to have a bigger target share for Malcolm Brogdon. And even if he shoots, 40% from the field, if that ends up being 9 for 22, that's still going to be a pretty exciting play. So keep an eye on that news and wiggle around appropriately on the various sites if you have the option to do so.
All right, hit us with questions. We'll get what we can in here. We've got 6 minutes.
And again, please refer to the rankings.
Rankings are key if you're a subscriber. Also give us a site if you've got it. No, we do not know if Sabonis is playing yet. That's why they're a game time decision. Eddie, why were you talking up Cantor earlier?
It's a massive matchup. He costs $4,000, and they have only 2 centers. So literally, I need 2 fouls in the first couple minutes on Tice, and I could get 30 minutes of Cantor. And 30 minutes of Cantor in this environment, missing people, I would project for, I don't know, 44 fantasy points, give or take. And at $4,000 on a 4-game slate, that's pretty exciting. So I would not expect, let me take a look at the ownership real quick and respond specifically to that, him to be quite as high owned as he should be for an upside guy. So the ownership update, apparently the field agreed with me, easier to get away from Davis than Rondo's. We now have Rajon Rondo at 70%. That's too high. There's just too many guards on the team. He projects brilliantly. He costs $4,300 or $4,600. He has triple-double upside in this matchup. I understand wanting to flood to that. 70% is too high. It's like 35% Luke Kennard on a big slate. Prices out absolutely beautifully. Less of an upside for Kennard, so it might even have been a worse play. Like if you suck down the chalk with Rondo, you're avoiding the risk of Rondo gets 50. But they're playing the Nuggets, and it's Rajon Rondo, and they have 6 other competent guards on the team and at least 1 other competent point guard, and he can just, not make any shots. And, the Lakers without LeBron can struggle for anyone but AD in isolation to score tonight. So 68% is too high. 46% Anthony Davis, fine. 37% Paul George, I'd probably have a little more, but fine. Same number on Giannis, fine. 26 on Tatum, I'd have more. 24 on Walker, I'd have more. 24 on Brogdon, again, news dependent. I'd be ready to have more if possible. 23% on Kuzma. I would rather Batum at this point, which feels weird, but is a real thing that I have to say. So we have Tice there at 23%. Yet another reason to be high on Enes Kanter. We have Enes Kanter at 10%. I have them projected very close to identically. I will take the guy who is less than half owned the other guy and who actually carries with him a larger upside rather than, the guy who costs more and is, they cost the same, or Cantor costs well more on DK. So that is a bit of a thing on DK. But so there's some stuff. Give me some questions. If
would you play? Would you go with Batum now, or would you wait for some other value to pop in the later games?
I would probably play Batum now at 3K. It's just 3K. It's a terrible matchup, but he is a guy who, his usage is literally on like 10% for the year. I don't know what it is, but it is a tragically small figure. All that said, I would probably just suck it down and get in there and hope that not enough people get there. He is the absolute floor on DK. There are massive downsides where dude plays 19 minutes or plays 26 minutes and takes 3 shots and only scores 11 fantasy points. So it really comes into a question of how owned you think he's going to be. And we'll be able to answer that question in about 90 seconds. But I think he only gets into the teens. And at that price, I'm a little more excited with that. I think Kuzma is similarly uncertain and is simply going to end up higher owned. So that's how I would come in on that.
All right. I'm trying to do an upload here. What do we got? 100% Lou and 100% Rondo. You just talked about that. Would you pivot off of Rondo to Caruso?
Yes, I specifically said I have no issue pivoting off Rondo to Caruso as a play.
Sorry,
I think that makes No. I wasn't complaining. I'm just saying. I specifically said I have no issue pivoting there. I have no issue pivoting from Rondo to Aaron Holiday in the next 30 seconds while you can still make that play. But yeah, on FanDuel, I think I would have a lot of lineups that end up on Lou and Montrez. Other lineups that end up on George. I like having those two or that one. They correlate well together. Trying to think of other things to randomly add at the last second here. But, Middleton will be under on them. Pretty big fan of his on FanDuel. 6,100. That's a little bit too cheap, and I don't think he will carry the ownership that he should. I think it's sort of gotten lost in the wind. You're still getting...
How are you feeling about Steven Adams?
I think he's fine. He ends up being perfectly nominal to me. The price has come down to a level where I no longer dislike him. It probably jumped the shark a little bit for a while there when you got up to, $7,000 Adams, down sitting at like 6,063. I would generally rather take the jump with Miles Turner and hope I am going to get to go without Sabonis. But I'm almost purely neutral on Steven Adams.
All right. If you don't have anybody from the first game, don't panic. Don't panic. It's okay.
Yeah. It was. If you don't have the first game is Charlotte and Boston, right? I'm not confusing myself somehow. Yeah. You're hoping the game goes into a blowout and no one gets a ton of minutes either side. But I'm not. There's no one in this game that was a must. You need the game to blow out at that point because otherwise you are going to get some sort of superlative performance out of, in my opinion, most likely Tatum, but Tatum, Brown, and Walker. All project very well. But if you had no one from this game, taking no one from this game and thinking it with the largest line on the slate blows out is not an unreasonable take. So if you didn't happen to get anyone, and that's, I talk a lot about process, and I haven't had time yet to do a process show and talk about ways I think to protect your investment and things, you should do as we're getting down towards a lock. But one of them is, have an escape plan. We frequently have slates that have 4, 6, 8, 11, 12 games and 1 or 2 locking at 7 o'clock. When you're like, oh, fuck, nothing looks good. Well, just get off that game. Just be like, okay, fine. I need to make sure I have a Celtic. So you're like, screw it. I'm locking in Kemba at point guard and then just make sure everyone else is not playing at 7 o'clock. Look back at the thing in 4 minutes and stop yourself from making a bad mistake. Because I've seen people really screw that up in the past where either they don't... and put them in the top half of the lineup. This sounds obvious, but I still see people like, here's my 100K winning lineup. And it's like, it's interesting how you locked your point guard in the guard spot at 7. And I'm not talking junk here, especially if you're using software and it's done automatically. But it's really something you want to make sure your settings are right to preclude, and you want to leave maximum flexibility. So I think I can look at optimals, which I haven't looked at for a while. But actually, I want to do ownership first. I'm kind of curious how this comes out, and I'm curious where Batum lands.
All right.
I'm going to be happy with anything under 30. And I have had the chalk, the late value moves have been really stronger than I expected a lot of times this year. I feel almost naive because I keep being like, I think only 28% of people get to this guy, and then he's like 45, and I'm like, well, I was wrong about that. But I'm thinking because of the uncertainty and just how awful he's been, minimum price Batum goes off at, I'll stick with high teens. And that still feels pretty good for me. He's 3K. I am less on team, obviously, for anyone who has watched my shows, mega chalk cheap guy than a lot of other people, or at least I think it is a nuanced situation. I hear a lot of people make the argument like, I know this guy's uber chalk, but he's so cheap at whatever, 3,000, 32, 36, that you can just slam him in there and you don't have anything to lose. I strongly disagree with that take. There are many slates where there are so many value guys, and even in, reasonable upside spots where you're, even if you're talking about, I don't know, what's a good example? Just from this game, Carson Edwards. If you had Nick Batum at 62%, or whether it's, Corey Joseph or, Emmanuel Mudiay or any of that stuff, and people are like, oh, they're so cheap, it's okay to lock them in. You're still talking about playing massively played guys, potentially giving up 10, 20-point advantages versus huge amounts of the field, because nothing is as chalky, or rarely is anything as chalky as value chalk. And we see an example of that tonight where Rondo is, heading up to 70%. And, the Anthony Davis, who is just as good of a play, simply because of the price tag and easier ways to pivot away from it, is instead sitting there at, 40, what have you, at this point. So I disagree with just suck down the super cheap chalk guy, but I'm optimistic for Batum tonight because I don't think enough people will get there. In a vacuum, Batum should be, let's see, he's flat minimum, and those are the other value pieces. Somewhere between 30 and 35%, I think, would be equitable. I think if everyone had perfect knowledge and spent time, you'd end up with, 33% minimum price Batum. I'm hoping that number is lower. Let's talk about it now. Do you have ownership?
I do.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Tell me the number one player is not Nick Batum, because that'll make me sad.
It is not Nick Batum.
Okay, I'm happy then, because he should be. None of these guys. This whole game is going to go under-owned, looking at ownership versus other things. I really liked the Celtics in this matchup. So I will guess that the highest owned one, it's DraftKings. It is going to be Tatum.
DraftKings, it's $8. It's 150,000 with 50,000 to first. God love
it is not 50,000 to first. Please tell me it's 25 or something. See, that's what I'm talking about when someone says, "Can I play Rondo and Caruso?" Well, yeah. When they're giving 33% of the damn prizes to one entry. Like, we talk about rake a lot. You need to maximize your chance to win, because if you remove much of your, like, let's say you play it very safe and play the best projected plays and play somewhat cashy lineups, that's fine as a strategy, but that ends up being the real downside. Sure, the rake is 15%, but if you count that, the rake is 48 goddamn percent goes to rake or first place. And if you will never allow yourself to get first place alone.
Do you want to know what 10th place is in that contest?
$600.
$500.
So close. Yeah. So it's brutal. It's a real thing. I mean, it's not brutal. You know the terms of the contest.
No, you do.
It's not.
And people are so dumb. People are so dumb. They're playing this and they don't get it. And I've been messaging DraftKings back and forth saying, "Would you please on Sundays create some more leagues or other smaller contests or whatever?" And they're like, "No, we're not going to do it. We're making our contest." And it's like, then I'm not playing them because they're way too top heavy and you're being idiots. They're like, fine, don't play them. I'm like, okay, whatever. I know I don't move the needle, but these are stupid. So I got to tell people.
You do move the needle, by the way. You and I are actually sitting here having a bitch session in front of it's Sunday at 6 o'clock. I doubt there's a lot of people, and we're after lock. What are there? 900 people listening to us right now?
I can tell you, we are 700. It was it was very light sports day. A lot of Christmas parties and holiday parties.
Oh, sure. But you see what I'm saying? There's 700 people listening to us. Yeah. It's not worth making a couple other contests that probably at least break even for you. Maybe have some operations cost and asking someone to do that, as opposed to having 700 people having an active conversation about how you're shortcomings with your product. Like, it's absolute.
They base it on how many games there are. So weekends they F the low dollar stuff and the smaller leagues. Yeah. They just don't make them. If there's 5 or less games, they'll make 2 on their entire site, 2 what they call contests that are 59 people to enter, 3 max, and these are 1 max, 118, 3 max, and then 2, 59 is 8 max.
I mean, I would need to see how many are not filling, and it would be NBA.
None of them are not filling.
Right, then it's just an error. And correct. Again, I do this for a living and have done this every day in my day job for 8 or more years, where I look at slates and populate contests, and that's just burnt money. Yeah. Like, you're just wasting money. If you are filling 2 of anything, doesn't matter, filling 2 of something every Sunday, week after week after week after week, and you don't make a third, that you're just simply lighting money on fire. And again, it should be automated. First of all, that is not. I have managed to write software to automate it, and I am code dependent, put mildly. I have some issues, and I have managed to create something that at least gives me an alert and says, "Hey, I thought you should know this keeps constantly filling this long before lock," to optimize that money. And I know they have contest teams and event teams, so it is surprising to me that they're not more attentive. But let's do the ownership thing real quick. Tell me Batum real quick.
Batum,
I'm going with
22.1.
okay. No, it's like meh. Okay, that's still lower than it should be. Not as too much lower as I was hoping you'd get. Again, 19, I think I said, but yeah, it feels fine. Like I would want more than 22 because again, the risk is nominal, and that ownership is not so great. And he's, I think, objectively still like the third best. Like I would have him projected for 26 minutes. I would have him projected for like 16 or 17 fantasy points. It's a tough matchup. He's 3K, and God forbid he has a monster 1 fantasy point per minute game. Yeah, so
All right. So
I like it at that number.
Tatum,
So Tatum
was
on top.
1. What do you think
Okay.
his percentage was?
29.
23.
Yeah, see that's
so Batum was only 1.5% behind him.
yeah, that's too cheap. Especially I think he was most advantageously priced on DK. FanDuel you had I think FanDuel you had Kemba at 79 instead of 82, and Brown at 7 flat instead of 73, and Tatum was only cheaper on DK. Canner also cheaper on FanDuel is relevant to look at, but yeah, that's too low. This is a really good spot for Jason Tatum. I presumed he would be higher than that. That's well too low. So then next is on DK. Is Batum next? I'm assuming if you said he's a percent less.
There's one person between them.
On DK, that'll be Kemba.
Yep.
Okay, and then Brown, or yeah, I'll go Brown. Is it Brown after Batum?
Tice, but
it's Tice. He got that high. Where's Canner? Now again on DraftKings, you spent like 500 extra on Canner, so it's not quite as analogous as FanDuel.
He's 13.7, so he's the next guy.
Okay, and somewhere around here, where was Jaylen Brown?
Got it. Outside of Batum, it's all Celtics. So Brown is right above Cantor at 17.
Well, it should be. Celtics are missing Hayward, missing Smart, replacing them with 2 low usage players, and Tice, who started last game and took 7 shots as opposed to everyone else taking 15, and Ojale, who started and took maybe 3. So it should be Celtics. Celtics get to play the Hornets, which is a vastly better spot, and they're missing guys, so that production's going to be focused on these 3 other dudes. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I'm sure some people played themselves because we have,
Rob Gardner says hello, by the way.
It feels like that name should mean
Fantasy Feud.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah. Shout out to you, man. Good to hear from you.
Hopefully he's still on. Gordon Hayward, 0.08. That's really it. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist.
I mean, out of the rotation, but active. With Batum starting, that's a bad idea.
Cody Martin, 0.16.
Yeah, that's. I mean, if you had to play a Martin, it's better than Caleb.
Caleb Martin, 0.01. Marcus Smart, 0.01. PJ Washington, 0.01.
Caleb Martin might actually be with the G League. I don't know that one offhand, I have to admit. I try to keep track of this stuff. Caleb Martin is with the G League. Okay, so that is also a playing of oneself.
Hernan Gomez, 1 lineup.
I think he's actually present and active. Like, I don't think he's gonna play, but maybe massive blowout. I'm not sure how long it's been since Sweet Dick Willie got out there and did some work. Oh my God, Batum's got a dime. That's 0.5x already.
All right, we still have shows tonight. 7:30, we have NFL Live Before Lock. That will be myself and Eric. I believe this is the last Sunday show. If anybody wants to let me know, I can't tell. I've looked for it. I can't tell if this year they're flexing a game to Sunday night in Week 17. I know they play the majority of them at 1, and then 3 or 4 are going off at 4. I don't know if they're flexing a game or not. I cannot find that anywhere for the life of me. So you would think the internet would not let me down, but I know that the people still watching will not let us down. Shout out to Fantasy Draft for hooking us up once again with another fun show. You could follow Eddie on Twitter at FastEddieFear. I'm at Inactives, and it is at Awesemo_COM. And with that, gamers,